All right. All right. So yeah, so it's good to be here. Yeah, so we can kind of just answer questions, talk about anything, private practice, solo practice, group practice, whatever it is that you might have on your mind. You can put it in the chat. I'll go ahead and answer them as they come in. And then, yeah, for people who might be watching this later, I will put the questions in the description so you can kind of see what was asked. And then, of course, you can kind of skip around the video and kind of look for the answers and things. But yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. You can go ahead and send them in the chat and we'll answer them as they come in. So we can ask anything about solo practice, group practice. I know there's a lot of questions typically about group practice. There seems to be a lot of people asking about that. But yeah, any question you might have would be totally cool. So put it in the chat. And then the chat, if you've never been on the YouTube live before, the chat is over there on the right side of the screen. And where it says say something, that's where you can put your question. See that more people are joining. If you just joined, you can go ahead and start asking whatever question you might have. You can just put it in the chat, and I'll answer it as they come in. All right, let's see. Can you do group therapy via telehealth? If so, then how? And what does your note process look like? And reimbursement look like as well? So that's a good question. So at this time, you are able to you're able to run groups virtually. A couple things to consider when doing that. The first is what platform you're going to do it on, right? So you could do it on, there's a way to do it on Simple Practice. A lot of people don't know this, but you can do it on Simple Practice. There's a workaround for it. I'll actually leave a link in the description for that workaround. Yeah, I'll leave a link down below to show you about the workaround. But you can do group therapy, like if you can do telehealth groups on Simple Practice, which works quite well. Or if you're going to use Zoom or something like that, you have to make sure it's the HIPAA compliant Zoom. So the first one is, how are you going to hold the group? Are you going to do it Zoom or some other platform? That's number one. That's not the hardest thing to solve. But that's the how, right? That's how you're going to do it. And you're going to run the group session if you're doing it via telehealth the same way you would your individual session, meaning you're going to share the link with people. But again, you have to make sure that this is all going to be HIPAA compliant. Everything has to be secure, obviously. So it's going to be the same process for an individual session, but you're just going to do it for a group. And then the note process, very similar. It's going to look similar to the individual session as well. You're going to keep your notes the same way you would. So I always recommend that people use like an EHR. So that's like a electronic health record, something like Simple Practice, therapy notes. I personally use Simple Practice. It works really well. And you're going to document your notes, your group session notes in that system right after your group is done. And then you're going to follow the guidelines for writing those notes. And those guidelines are going to be, I would always encourage you to kind of find a note-taking template that someone like a healthcare attorney has looked through, or a template that has been used before by other people. It's good to use a template that kind of meets all the requirements. And when I say requirements, there's requirements for insurance reimbursement if that's what you're going to do. And then there's also just legal and ethical requirements that you want to make sure you're meeting in terms of your documentation. I will leave links below to different attorneys you can contact, as well as to some more information about that. And then reimbursement. So if you're on a platform like Alma or Headway, they have a group therapy code that you can use. And so you can run groups and submit the claim the same way you would for an individual session. And then if you're contracted on your own, it's going to be the same thing. You just ask them to give you a group, like what is the code to bill for group therapy? And you want to make sure that that's something you have in your contract, that you are able to run group therapy under the contract you have with an insurance panel. So those are the couple ways that you would run groups. It's not too much different. I think the things that you do, the big red flags that you want to keep in mind are getting an informed consent as well. So you want to make sure a group informed consent, it's very different than an individual one, because groups that are with a lot of people, there's certain elements of confidentiality you can coding. If you're submitting claims, you're using the right billing code. So those are things you really want to look out for. Again, I'll leave some more information about that down below in the description. Hopefully that helps, answers the question there. Another question someone asked is, when having a PLLC and we want to add our LMSW to our practice, are we in charge of credentialing for them? If so, do you have any recommendations as far as companies that can help with credentialing? So this is a good question. So in the research and kind of the stuff that I've looked at before, I was actually just reading about this the other day. There's a couple things that you can do. So if you do a group contract, meaning you kind of contact the insurance company as the group practice owner, you have the PLLC, you're going to set up what's called a group contract, meaning the insurance company has contracted with your group practice to provide certain services. Underneath that umbrella of the group contract, you can have LMSWs under there. In that case, you're going to, whatever LMSWs you bring in, they're going to be now a part of your group. Now, of course, they're going to be credentialed. You have to go through that process. But with the group contract, it's going to be a bit different. But when you get a group contract or a contract, any contract for an insurance reimbursement with an insurance company, you're going to have a liaison, basically, who's going to help panel people, do all the credentialing on their end, that kind of thing. So for example, if you were to, let's say you're going to panel with Aetna and you get a group contract with them, every time you bring on an LMSW, you'd contact that liaison, and then they would go ahead and kind of do everything on the back end. Now, that's a group contract. Sometimes insurance companies will only do individual contracts. In that case, everyone has to get paneled individually, right? And the big difference there is if you get a group contract and someone's paneled underneath that, once they leave your practice, they're no longer paneled at all. If someone's paneled individually, and even though they're working for you, if they're paneled as an individual, once they leave, they're still paneled. And it's up to you to decide how you want to help them. How much do you want to get involved? Of course, if it's a group contract, there'll probably be a lot more involvement, right? You'll help them out. You'll kind of do some of the coordination there. Individual contract, it's up to you to decide, how you're going to help them. But most insurance companies will not contract individually with an LMSW. That they're never going to do that. At least in my experience, they'll do what's called incident to billing, but that's still between you, the LC, and the insurance company. So incident to billing is something you can look into. That's one way to be able to have LMSWs do to take insurance. But basically the way that works is that they see you as the provider, and then the LM kind of can do the work, but you're the supervisor, right? And so the insurance company basically has a ton of requirements for the supervisor, whether it be to read the treatment plans, to review the treatment plan, be there for the creation of the treatment plan, step in the room every so often. And that's some of the requirements for incident to billing, but that is something that you can do. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of clarity there on how to panel a group versus individual contract, things like that. And then companies, there are a lot of different companies out there. Um, there's a few, I haven't done it myself. I don't have a group contract myself, but I will actually put a few, because there's a bunch. I will put a few down below in the description for you. Um, I get tons of actually spam mail about credentialing companies. You want to be careful not to just use anyone. But I'll put a few down below in the description after this video for you to look into. Um, Someone asked, for solo practice, any ideas on how to market to get new clients? So this is a good question. I have a few kind of helpful tips that might be a starting point for you. I think on one hand, if you want to market, the first approach that I would take is kind of by communicating with your network that you already have in existence, whether it be colleagues or former colleagues, things like that, and let them know that you are open for business and what it is that you do. If you are someone who's doing kind of you have a practice in a specific area, you can see if there's public places where you can put a flyer. Flyers might seem outdated, but if you have a flyer up with your practice information and what you do in like a local coffee shop or in a library, this could also be very, very helpful. And then also you can kind of look into perhaps networking with local physicians or other people that are in constant contact with people that might be looking for therapy. So that's kind of the practical, kind of like neighborhood kind of approach. I would also recommend, I wouldn't say like social media marketing for per se, like become an influencer, nothing like that. But one thing you can do is think about putting out one piece of helpful content. Maybe that's one video or one blog post that answers a question that a potential client of yours might be asking. So, for example, a while back, I made a video about what DBT is. What exactly is DBT? We do DBT in our practice, and a lot of clients want to know what that is. So I made a video about it. And then now I'm always able to reference that video. Sometimes people find that video. And this is one way to have people kind of market your practice, but in a way where you're providing value to someone that might be looking for your service. So that's a couple ideas there. Hopefully that helps, a good starting point. Let's see. Someone asked, how do you get a group contract? What you're going to do is you're going to actually go to like so one is the credentialing company. This is going to be the easiest route, but it's also going to be a little bit more expensive because the credentialing company is going to want you to pay them. And then also it's going to be more expensive, but probably easier. Or you can get in contact with the insurance company yourself. And if you go to an insurance company's website, let's say it's Health First or Blue Cross, whatever it is, there's going to be a page. You can look for it. It's like under the for providers section. I'll put a link down below, and you'll be able to see. It'll say, for providers, are you looking to join our network? And you would fill out a form, and then someone will get in touch with you. It's for some insurance companies, it's a long, arduous process. But as you go through that process, you're going to say, I'm looking for a group contract. And then they're going to tell you whether or not they can. Does Aetna give that to you? That's a question. Does Aetna give that to you? So basically the group contract, you can say that I have a group practice and I want to have a group contract, but it's going to be up to the insurance company as to whether or not they actually will do the group contract with you. Some will, some won't. It really depends on the insurance company. But you can be very clear that that's what you're looking for. So someone asked, I am contracted with Journey Clinical. It seems to be a practice that does ketamine-assisted therapy. Do you know if I attain a client on Journey, if I can use someone's insurance via my ALMA credentialing? So that's going to be a discussion you want to have with the practice manager or the person over at Journey. Because when you think about ALMA, you are your own individual provider on there. So you would technically not be seeing that client through Journey unless Journey is the one who set you up with Alma and they're managing all of it. Right. So it would look like if you have a client from your Journey practice there, and you get one from there, but then you start seeing them through Alma, if Journey is not connected with Alma and you in that way, then it's almost as if the client is seeing you as your own entity and not with Journey anymore. So you're going to want to talk to Journey about their relationship with Alma and you, and kind of figure it out that way. It's not as simple as getting paired with Alma and then going to different, different groups and saying, hey, I'm paneled. You want to kind of work with that particular practice and say, hey, I'm on Alma, can we work together on that way, and just kind of go from there. But start with Journey and ask them. I think that's where you'd want to start. And then I see someone here responded to the comment saying, if you're paneled under Headway, you can do a group practice. Now, this is true. You can do a group practice on Headway. However, one thing to know is that no LMSWs can be paneled on Headway. No people working towards their license can be paneled on Headway. It has to be a fully licensed individual. So LCSW, LMHC, obviously PhD, but no LMs and no MHCs, LPs can be paneled on Headway. Fully licensed people only. So just be aware of that. Yeah, so that's helpful to know. A lot of people ask about that. So let's see. Just to confirm, if I do a group contract with Aetna, for example, can they do credentialing for the LM? To make it a little bit less confusing, there's two ways you can do it. The first one is what we talked about, the group contract. So let's say I go to Aetna and I say, hey, Aetna, I have this group practice. It's called PRGRS Therapy. I want to set up a group contract with you. And they say, okay, yeah, we do group contracts. And I'll say, okay, as in our practice, we have LMSWs, we have MHCs, LPs. How can we get them paneled? And they'll tell you, and then they'll do it. They'll kind of work with you to get everyone paneled under the group contract. The second way that might happen is they might say, hey, we don't do a group contract, but with Aetna, we do something called incident to billing, which allows your LMSW to take insurance. But in that case, your LMSW would not necessarily get paneled. You would have to follow Aetna's guidelines for what's called incident to billing to be able to use your own self, like your LCSW, as the supervisor for the LMSW. But on paper, it would look like you were doing the service. However, the LMSW can do the service as long as they follow the incident to guidelines. Gets very confusing. I will leave links down below to incident to billing information and what that's all about. In my opinion, it's very cumbersome. There's a lot of requirements. It's very confusing. You might want to think about whether or not that's something you want to do. So hopefully that kind of helps you a little bit. To get an LMSW paneled, group contract, incident to billing. Incident to billing, they don't actually get paneled. They're just kind of seeing people through your license. Group contract, they will get paneled, but the insurance company will help you do that. So that's some good questions here. A lot of we're getting a broad range of things here: marketing, solo practice, running groups, group contracts, insurance, LMSWs is very helpful. Hopefully, yeah. Any other? I'll be here hanging out, so please keep the questions coming. So the EMCPT codes, I am a bit familiar. Let me just refresh my self on EMCPT codes. I am pretty sure. Let me see. Let me just double check this. Yeah. So this is something I'm pretty sure that as therapists, social workers, mental health counselors, we are not able to bill for EMCPT codes. I believe that this is only to be done by a doctor or kind of a medicating professional. I'm not 100% sure. I'm trying to double check here, but I do believe that this is something that we cannot do as therapists. But let me just double check real quick. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I believe these are for like doing tests and things like that. So actually, I think that you may be able to do that. It depends on your contract. So with Alma and Headway, if the last time I checked, I do not think that a therapist can bill for those codes. However, if you have your own contract, then I do think you can. I think by the EM CPT codes you're referencing, like being able to bill for like PHQ-9, GAD-7, those kinds of things, there is a way to do it. It might be those codes, but I'm pretty sure on Alma and Headway, those codes are not available. Um, and then it would actually be dependent upon your insurer whether or not those would be for initial sessions or you can do those in an ongoing fashion. Because I know some people like to do PHQ-9 GAD-7 ongoing. I personally I do it every month in my practice. And yeah, so I think it is worth checking out. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that you can actually, if it is for the PHQ-9 and GAD-7. Um, but there's certain codes that I tried to use once that were very similar that didn't go through because I was not a doctor. Someone asked if I do telehealth. Do I need to obtain workers' comp? Yes, you still do. Telehealth is not going to change the requirements of what you need. Um, you still do need to do it. The workers' compensation. Um, I'm pretty sure it's a New York state law. I'm 90% sure. I mean, I'm not 100%, but when I was advised by an attorney, workers' comp, they knew that I was doing an all virtual practice, and they said, yes, you need workers' comp. That's something you do need to do. Um, yeah, and I think you're asking that because how does someone get hurt on the job sitting at a computer? I'm not sure of the technicalities, but from my conversations with attorneys, workers' comp is required even if you're doing telehealth. These are great questions here. Let's see. I'm actually going to look up while I'm waiting for other questions to come in. I'm going to look up billing codes for the PHQ-9 to see what that was. Okay. Yeah. So there is. Yeah, that's where it gets a little bit confusing. So there are codes actually for um, the PHQ-9. There's codes that you can use for the GAD-7, things like this. It looks like there's a couple codes. I'm going to put this link down below. Let's see. There's two codes you might want to check out here. Where is it? Yeah, so I'm actually going to, because there's a lot of here. I'm gonna get that information for you, organize it. I'll put it down below in the description. Um, yes, so if you sign up for Gusto, they will help you and walk you through the process of getting workers' comp. They'll kind of help you. They'll answer all your questions for you. There's certain things you're still going to have to do, but they'll help you through the process. They have really, really good customer service. If you're interested in using Gusto and signing up for it, I have a link down below. It does help me out a little bit. You don't have to use that link, but if you do, it does help me. It helps me do things like this. But yeah, Gusto would help with that. Okay. Yep. Um, Yeah, so I'm seeing here, just going back to the coding question, I'm seeing two different codes that people sometimes use for these screeners and assessments. One is the G0444. Another one is the 96127. Now, I have not done enough research on those specific codes, but those codes look like we have to kind of do some research on who can do them. There is, yeah, sometimes a difference, but who can, doctors versus therapists and social workers. So, again, I'll do a little bit more back end research. I'll put the info that I find down below in the description, but don't just bill it, assuming that you can. Um, all right, let's hear. Someone asked, do you offer admin rates? I think you're probably asking about writing. Are you asking about like writing notes and things like that? So the way we kind of do things in our practice is that we in my practice, the way I do it is that clinicians are paid an hourly rate, and then sessions are not a full hour. So then people have that extra hour for their note taking and documentation. So it works that way. So people are still being compensated for the notes that they're writing, that kind of thing. Let's see here. Uh, do you have to write a discharge note in telehealth? As you may know, some patients don't always come back and book again. In those cases, or even in cases where it's a patient's last visit due to completion. So basically, it sounds like this you're asking, do you need to write a discharge note? One, if you're just doing telehealth, and two, if someone doesn't come back or they kind of like unexpectedly don't return, things like that. So this is a great question. It's a question I actually asked a while back, and the answer is you're going to get a variety of people giving you different answers. The answer is yes. You are going to have to write a discharge note. It is going to be uh, dependent though. So it is, again, it's another one of these questions that's complex, but it shouldn't be. It feels like it shouldn't be. If you work for like a community agency, there's going to be particular, and they're like a licensed agency. So some community health centers are like licensed by the mental health department of the state, things like that. There's going to be requirements for timelines for when you discharge, like write an official discharge note. Maybe it's a month, maybe it's 6 months, something like that. In private practice, because you're not licensed by like the Office of Mental Health, you're a licensed provider, but you're not like a licensed facility. You don't kind of have those same exact very strict requirements. At the same time, you don't want to just go noteless. So there is and I'll link a few down below, but the state of New York, I'm from New York and I'm sure other states have this. They are going to have like guidelines for you in regards to when and how you should complete documentation. So you still want to follow that. And some of it's not that clear, right? I know when I asked this question a while back, some people told me write it after a year of them not coming back. Some people told me 6 months. But at the end of the day, you are going to want to write that discharge note. The way I think about note taking is you always want to imagine if someone was to audit you, even if that's not going to happen, just imagine it was. You don't want to be, oh, I don't have a discharge note because the client didn't come back. You always want the discharge note. In my practice, I'll usually write a discharge note. This is a personal preference after about um, 30 days of my last contact. And this is after a couple tries of trying to reach out to someone. So yeah, so something like that. But I'll leave more information again to that down below in the description. And if you're doing telehealth, all of the same documentation applies to you. I do all telehealth. It's all the documentation I do. It's the exact same as if you're in person. Someone asked about imposter syndrome. How do you deal with that? That's a good question. Um, I think in some regard, a lot of people are dealing with that. It's quite normal to deal with it. In many ways, we kind of have to just think about, we can kind of accept it as kind of a thought and something that we have that we're kind of dealing with. Or we can kind of give it some weight and then kind of lean into it. And in many cases, we want to think about it as a thought that passes through and then kind of doing the things that we know we can do as clinicians and as people who have gone through training and things like that. Someone asked, when doing telehealth, is the patient required to sign their treatment plan, or can we just note in our notes that completed the treatment? So yes, they have to sign. This is quite cumbersome. It used to be cumbersome, but now with Simple Practice, it's just click and sign. You can do a treatment plan inside Simple Practice, and then just send it to the client, and they'll just click and sign in their portal. So yes, you do need their signatures on everything that will require a signature in person. Yeah, so definitely. So we need to do that for sure. In regards to the discharge note, I'm assuming this part would not be billed. So as a social worker or a therapist, and I'm speaking specifically for licensed clinical social workers, and I'm pretty sure that's going to be the same for mental health counselors and things like that. You do not bill for notes and documentation outside of session. Like, you don't bill for notes and documentation. Insurances do not reimburse you for that. I know for physicians, it's different. I think for some physicians, they do get reimbursed for note taking and documentation. As therapists in the state of New York, at least with the contracts that I've seen, you do not. You get reimbursed for face-to-face client care, but not for writing notes. So if you write a discharge and the client hasn't showed up, no, you're not able to submit that to an insurance company for reimbursement. Got some really good questions. If things I'm sharing are kind of confusing on the first pass, you can ask me for clarification. Hopefully, it's coming across clear for you. Um, but yeah, you can keep the questions coming. Let's see. So someone asked, how do you have someone a person sign a treatment plan via Headway? And that's one of the reasons why using Headway and Alma for documentation, it works. It's fine. Their features are not fully caught up to what's needed. So we do need to find a way to get the person to sign the treatment plan. I'm not sure if you're able to download it as a PDF and then send it to the client, and then have them sign it on their end and then send it back to you. A couple things to consider there. They're going to have to, email it to you, which is perhaps not secure if you don't have a HIPAA compliant email. You can ask Headway, how do you get signatures via their platform? I'm not familiar with Headway. That's one of the reasons why I kind of keep all of my notes in Simple Practice. I know it's, for some people, Headway and Alma have these tools built in. They're just not quite caught up to all the requirements yet. So yeah, you can think of other ways, maybe sending it to the client via email, that kind of thing. But I would start with Headway. I would hope that they would have a way for the client to sign it, but I'm not too sure. So someone asked about writing notes after a session. It can be tedious. Any recommendations for completing them quick? Awesome question. Yes, I have some recommendations. So the first one is what I would call pre-charting. Pre-charting is when you have a caseload for that day. I would take 5 or 10 minutes and open up those charts for that day, and you can begin to insert basically templates. Now, hear me out. I'm not saying that you would insert information about a session before it happens. Never, ever, ever. But you can begin inputting like the beginning of a phrase or something like that in your template. A lot of times people open up a note and it's blank every single time. This is not really efficient or effective. But for example, like, what might a template look like? If you have phrases that you use all the time, like for example, the client presented as, right, and then you're going to put the mood and affect and all. You can have the client presented as like a template phrase, or different phrases and things like that you use over and over again. You can insert those things into the document before you see the client for that day. And then when the client comes, you kind of fill out the template with the information. So one thing I do is I create templates for myself with phrases and words I use all the time to make note taking a little bit easier. And then I also just open the charts at the beginning of the day I don't necessarily, obviously, I'm not putting information in there. I haven't seen the client yet, but part of the tedious process is also opening the notes. Right, this can take a lot of time. We have to open the note, so sometimes just opening it, making it much easier to enter the note right after the session is much quicker. And one thing you have to remember with documentation is not a narrative. It's not a long story. You are writing notes to basically, you're not keeping a diary. You are writing notes to justify why someone's in treatment. And in that regard, you don't need to write anything too lengthy. So as you grow as a clinician, you'll learn different ways of being really concise with how you describe things. But sometimes the mentality you want to think about is, how do you write a note concisely that that kind of describes why someone's in treatment, and kind of, what they're getting from treatment and what you're providing them, that kind of thing. But pre-charting, templates, big, I think these things are really helpful. And also, if my computer is lagging a little bit, I'm sorry. You might see this kind of lagging a bit. My computer is kind of old. It might even sound like it's spinning a lot now. So if it's skipping a little bit, I'm sorry. I think the audio will still come through well, though. And I'm just now checking emails. It looks like a couple people have sent me emails. Someone had asked, how do you go about starting a group in telehealth? I have a lot of experience doing groups, but do not know how to start one in private practice or telehealth. So yeah, this is a great question. So starting a group, and I'm assuming this person is talking about like a therapy group, some sort of group that meets and group therapy. It's actually quite difficult to do that in private practice, and the reason why I say it's difficult is because you need to market the group, you need to reach the right population, um, and in a clinic setting or a hospital setting, that was kind of happening for you. Kind of were scheduled to run a group, right? And people would kind of just come to the group. But in your private practice, you now have to market that group, and it's different than individual therapy, obviously, right? So not everyone who comes for individual therapy is going to want to be in the group. So one way to really market your group practice is going to be to other clinicians. So whatever your special, whatever group you're running, perhaps reach out to individual therapists who are working with clients that are kind of that fall under the kind of the theme of the group that you're doing, right? So I run a group for executive, or our practice runs a group for executive functioning. I'll reach out to psychiatrists and other therapists who work with people who are dealing with that kind of thing, and let them know, hey, I'm offering this group, and this is something you can do. And then over time, people are going to remember that you're running this group, and they'll send people to you. You can also talk to your own individual caseload about the group. Um, Another thing you want to do, you want to have a flyer for the group. So you create this in on your computer, a flyer with your contact information, your name. Well, that's your contact. The time of the group, is insurance accepted or not, what you do in the group, and then that flyer you can kind of circulate in your networks and your communities. I have a flyer for our group, and it works well. People ask me for it, and then they share it. So having a flyer is going to be another way to do that. Let's see. So another question came in as well. So someone had stated that they have been on Alma for a little while and are not as happy, or are not too content with the amount of referrals they have gotten, and they want to know kind of how to build the process, build up a practice, perhaps. So to answer that question, just to give you some encouragement, um, in the beginning, the first couple of months, 2, 3, you mentioned the term. It's been 4 months for you haven't got that many referrals. Um, that's okay. It's a normal part of the process. One thing about private practice is it's an emotional roller coaster. Some days are very exciting, some days are very difficult. one day you'll get 2 referrals, 3 referrals in one day, and get all excited. And then you'll go a month or two and not get any and feel really discouraged. So this emotional roller coaster is going to be a very normal part of the process. The other thing to keep in mind is that when you're on a platform like Alma, Psychology Today, these are helpful platforms, but they're also going to have kind of like their natural ebbs and flows. So you might get, especially in this, you're going to notice there's changes in the different times of the year with the intensity of people reaching out. So for the last 4 months, it might have been kind of slow. Perhaps it could be just a thought. It could be because of the holidays and things like that. And then you might see a pickup in January. 4 months seems like a lot. Like a lot of time has passed and you haven't gotten the referrals that you want. At the same time, 4 months in retrospect, it's not a ton of time. So we can give it a little bit more, maybe give it a year and kind of see how it flows throughout the year. If you're still not getting a lot of referrals, then yeah, we can think about changing it up. And a few things to think about when you're thinking about your referral base, your kind of how many referrals you're getting. The way I think, sorry, there was an alarm that just went off. A couple of things I think about. I think about the I think about Psychology Today, Alma, and these kind of platforms. They are basically one way that you get referrals, but you also want to be very active in your networking. You want to be very, very active in putting stuff out to networks like LinkedIn, offering, letting people know that this is what you're doing. You're open for business. So you want to be very active as well in sharing those profiles, in networking with your community. I think one thing is that you can certainly build up a practice with just kind of like the Psychology Today, the Alma. It might be a little bit slow, but what I've noticed is people that have that and then also do very active kind of outreach and marketing for their practice, it tends to grow much quicker. At the end of the day, though, it starts slow. I think no one talks about this enough. Starting is really slow. It's really difficult. It's hard emotionally. I had a colleague who, for several months, no referrals, and then seemingly overnight. It was not overnight, but after a while, they're now full, and they can't take any clients anymore. So you'll get there. You can also think about tweaking your profile, the wording, things like that. So there's things you can do, but also it's okay. It's okay. It's part of the process. Let's see. So someone asked about, they're all virtual and they want to know about, what do you do? You don't have a physical office space. So what do you do about home address versus personal address, EIN, setting up your LLC, your EIN, all this kind of stuff. People, obviously you need an address for a lot of these things. And actually I made a video all about that. There is a way to get a real address for these things. I'm going to leave it down below in the description for you. It's a very, very quick video, but there is a way you can get a real address, not a PO box, a real address that you can use for all of those things. And so I'm going to leave that down below in the description. The video is just like that. How do you get a real address? That will answer all your questions. And so check that out. It's down below. But yeah, that video will help you out. But I guess just to briefly, if you're looking for, there's a service called iPostal One. iPostal One. I'll put it in the link down, the description down below. This is a way to get an address, a legitimate address. It's real. While also it's not a PO box, and it's a real address that you can use for those kinds of things. Someone asked, is having a new client sign a consent form a requirement or just highly suggestible? And is there a consent form available on Alma to use? Having a consent form is 100% required. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about that. A consent form is basically a person acknowledging the risks, benefits. They're basically acknowledging that they know what therapy is all about and they're willing to sign up for it. So in a consent form, you're going to see risks, you're going to see benefits, you're going to see all the things that could go wrong, all the things that could go right. An informed consent is how is how you could tell that someone is willingly signing up for your services, consenting to what you do as a therapist, consenting to your kind of treatment. So there's no option there. You have to have someone sign it. They have to read it. They have to sign it in order to begin working with you. If you don't have a consent on file, that is not, I would never, ever, ever start without having a consent signed. So make sure you get that signed. There are templates on Alma. I'm pretty sure there's templates on Simple Practice. Um, the templates, I have not read the templates them myself. I had an attorney actually look at my template to make sure it was okay, that everything was in there. So the templates that I use are from an attorney that I've worked with. If you're interested in learning more about those templates and things, I actually have a manual that I've made that's available for purchase. I'll leave that down below in the description. That manual walks people through how to start a private practice. It's fairly comprehensive. Or you can just kind of look up. I'll also leave a link down below to attorneys that you can call to talk about this. But yes, you need the consent that's required. Um, Cool. So we answered a lot of the questions on the email. We've been answering the questions in the chat. Um, let's see. So yeah, I'm happy to stick around for a little bit longer. If you guys have questions, feel free to send them over. And just a question, is this coming through clear for you guys? Is it skipping around? Is it kind of like getting pixelated, or is this live stream coming across okay? You can just let me know in the comment in the little chat box over there. Thank you. Cool. That's helpful to know. Um, yeah, while we wait for more questions, just so you know, I'll be doing these kind of office hours regularly, where I'll pop on and answer questions. I find it's really hard to find like really clear answers about private practice, online. A lot of searching, a lot of googling, and to have someone to actually kind of talk to live can be really helpful. So I'll be doing this more regularly. If you guys have questions, you can you can send me an email. You can, you'll be on follow me in the YouTube is where I spend most of my time on social media. You'll see I'll post there. You'll see upcoming live streams and things like that. Let's see. Okay, so someone asked another good question. How long would you recommend doing a solo practice before venturing out to a group practice? This is a great question. Um, I will say it's not so much about length of time as it is about a few factors that we'll talk about. Um, so, one is this: one is you want to be proficient in all of your workflows in your own private practice. So, when I talk about that, I mean, how to phone screen the client, do work with the client, what it is you do, filling out forms, writing notes, scheduling, billing for insurance, accepting cash. But you want to have your own personal workflow down and proficient. I know when you first start solo practice, there's a lot to learn, right? You have to kind of figure out your workflow. How do you bill insurance? How do you use Alma? How do you, do this? So getting really, making sure you're at a stage where you're like you're comfortable, you're proficient in your workflow, because what you're going to have to do when you take on an employee is teach them that workflow as well. Now, you're also going to have to adjust when you kind of have employees. You'll have to change your workflow, but you're going to need to teach them what you do every day so they can also do it. So one is kind of proficiency in your daily practice. The second consideration is going to be more of a financial one. So when you do a group practice, it is a lot more upfront costs than a solo practice, and a lot more upfront before, a lot more upfront before you, begin to kind of break even again. And so you're gonna have to pay for payroll software. You're gonna have to pay for workers' compensation. You're gonna have to pay, you know, um, for paid family leave. There's all these different, and you're gonna have to also pay for the simple practice account or whatever EHR you use. That's quite high. So for every employee, you're going to have to pay for that. If you don't have a PLLC set up or some sort of business entity, you're going to have to pay for that. So there's a lot more upfront costs. And when you hire employees, it's going to take a little while to fill your employees up, to get them going. And also to get them going, it's going to require a lot of time. You have to hire them, interview them, hire them, onboard them. If they're LMSWs, you're now supervising them, right? And these are all things that you're obviously not billing for. You're not seeing a client, because you're going to be teaching the therapist. You're going to be onboarding a therapist. So you're going to also need to make sure you're in a spot where that's possible for you. And then also, do you have the time to do it? Right. So because you're going to be devoting a lot more time to these therapists and onboarding them, are you able to kind of cut your caseload down a little bit, or are you able to kind of work it in somewhere? So that's going to be another factor in consideration. So right off the bat, there's three things I'd think about: your own proficiency in your practice, the financial implications, that is going to be a lot more upfront costs in the beginning, much more than solo practice. And then three, do you have the time to do it? Because it's going to be time consuming to do all the hire, onboard, these kinds of things. And that time is going to take away from your current clinical practice. So think about those things. It's not, I know that might sound scary. It's not. You can do it for sure. I was able to keep a full caseload while also training is the thing. People, training people and hiring staff. But it took a lot. It takes a lot of time, and but it's something to consider. All right. Hopefully that's helpful for you. Someone asked, can you set a 24-hour cancellation fee with clients on the consent template? I guess that would have to come out of pocket for a client. Great question. So when you are setting a cancellation fee, you can set whatever fee you would like because it is your quote unquote business. So you can set your fee to whatever it is you would like and whatever hours you'd like to do. You're going to see very common. Most people have a 24-hour cancellation fee. You'll see people charging their entire session rate all the way to something like $20, $50. The good news is you can pick whatever you want. Now you don't want to go so far out of the ordinary that it's like not, like you're going to stay within the realm of what most people do. Obviously, it would make no sense to charge, $1,000 for a cancellation fee, and make it like 72 hours in advance. No one does that. But what you want to do is kind of see what are other therapists' cancellation fees and what makes sense for you in your practice, right? So in our practice, we have a 48-hour cancellation policy, because we're just not able to fill people up without that kind of notice. With 2 days, we can kind of like find we can fill the spot, or the spot is offered to someone else. But if it's 24 hours, it's just not, it's not enough. So ours is 48 hours. And then it's up to you what you charge. Now that does need to be in the consent, because the client needs to know what they're signing up for. And they're signing up for a service where there's a fee if they don't show up, or there's late cancellation. So that does need to be in the consent. They do need to sign, in your consent is going to be also all your practice policies. Right. So what your late cancellation fee is, how do people schedule with you? What if there's an emergency? What are your business hours? All of that needs to be in the consent. People need to know exactly what they're signing up for. So hopefully that answers your question. All right, we got a lot of great questions. So I'm going to hang out for like another 5 minutes. I'm at about 54. I'll go a full hour. So I'll hang out for like another 5 minutes. If you have questions, from now until then, please let me know. I can put them in the chat here. And again, if you're going to be watching this later, everything that we talk about will be down below in the description, and you can kind of check all that out. If you guys are new to checking out, my, kind of private practice stuff, I'm glad to have you. I'm glad you stopped by. Feel free to check out my other videos on YouTube. There's a whole bunch on there. One of my main goals is to make private practice, starting it, running it, growing it, accessible for people, and providing, the information and knowledge to people in a way that's accessible. And most of the stuff that I'm able to provide, at least through YouTube and those videos, I want to do it in a way that's free. So a lot of all my videos obviously are free. I give a lot of information in those videos, and then I'll be doing these office hours as well. So go ahead and you can feel free to share my YouTube with other people. Check it out. I'm always posting things. Usually I try to do once a week. Um, but yeah, I'm really glad for you guys to stop by. You guys are asking some really good questions. Looks like we're good. I've answered all the questions on the email, I believe. Yep, so we're good on email. Looks like so far all the questions in the chat are answered. Again, we got about 4 more minutes. So if you have questions, good time to ask them. If not, you can always watch this a little later. Oh, yes, I didn't answer that second part. And any cancellation fee. So yeah, no insurance is going to reimburse for a cancellation fee. So that will come out of the client's pocket. And again, the client needs to know that at the end of the day, the informed consent is basically making sure that there's no surprises at all, that a client is fully aware of what they are signing up for, everything, that they're signing up for, risks, the benefits, fees, when they can contact you, all that stuff. So your consent needs to be fairly comprehensive. Um, and yeah, so again, I'll leave a link down below to a lawyer, a couple kind of lawyers that you can call to kind of confirm if your consent is up to standards. You'll see a lot of templates out there, but it's always helpful to kind of confirm that. All right. So we're going to wrap up in just about a minute here. Again, awesome to have you guys kind of log in, ask questions. I really want this to be a place where you can feel free to ask all your questions about private practice, hopefully leave with a little more clarity. I know myself when I first started, it was really difficult, really hard to find clear answers. I'd find all sorts of answers all over the internet, and it was hard to find one place where you can go and kind of get some clarity and direction. So I want this to be that kind of place. um, you guys asked some great questions today. Please feel free to connect with me on YouTube. You can send me an email. But yeah, we're gonna wrap up the live here, and yeah, happy holidays to you guys, and hopefully I will see you soon.